What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. This one is massive. I'm blanking who recommended this video to me, but if you're out there and you're watching this and you see this, please let me know in the comments. I'll shout you out in the next video. But anyways, I got a recommendation to look at this channel, and it is called End of Agnoa or Agnoia. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that name. But this one is wild. I've been going down a rabbit hole of pre-birth memories, and I'm starting to think that there is a lot to these pre-birth memories, much more so than NDEs, where we're potentially more susceptible to manipulation. And the really fascinating thing about these pre-birth memories, I should say these because they're actually kind of two rolled into one here. It's two gentlemen who both have pre-birth memories, and they're sharing their common experiences. The difference between these two accounts and the previous two that I've covered is these guys, I think, see it for what it was. Whereas the other two were trying to hear their recounting and their retelling of the story, but they've sort of bought in to the new age idea of life as a school and we're here to learn and this is the purpose and whatnot. These guys actually saw through the manipulation. They remember the manipulation. They remember how they were coerced or actually almost borderline of being forced into this life. It is very, very interesting that I think we get this very clear perspective from these two individuals. And what do we chalk it up to? What do we chalk up the differences in interpretation to? And look, we're still trying to figure this out. I can't say 100% that the other guys are wrong and these guys are right. That's what it feels like, though, to me. I chalk it up to discernment. For whatever reason, these guys seem to have a stronger level of discernment. They seem to have maybe a better understanding of exactly what was going on. And I think they describe it really beautifully. So I've extracted some really powerful excerpts. We're going to go through them step by step, some really wild stuff here. So pay attention, and hopefully I've broken it up into ways with the timestamps as well that you can jump around if need be. But hopefully it's very digestible and you're going to get a ton of value out of this video. So without further ado, here we go. End of Agnoia. And we've got this first clip. They tried to wipe my memory more. And the reason why this is notable is both of these guys talk about the memory wipe. They talk about agreeing to a memory wipe, but what they agreed to, they felt as though more was attempted to be taken from their memories, which is very, very interesting. Check this out.
Your experience brought up a remembrance in mine, and that was, even though I made that deal to remember, I remember when I started getting shot down the tunnel, the entity was also at the top of the tunnel trying to wipe my memory more as I was going down. So after hearing yours, it brought up a remembrance in me, and there's lots of that happens. So I think we could definitely do that, in the future with tons of other remembrances and other things that, happen.
That's pretty crazy. Okay. And the reason why that's super wild to me, and actually, by the way, I've gone out of order here. This is actually my very last slide. We're going to have to go back to the first one. But the reason why this is pretty wild is this is going to get to the question of how much do we have to consent to as we enter into this plane? Is it full consent to each and everything? Or is there some coercion? Is there, like, you give a little bit of consent and then they take more from it and they try to ramp it up, maybe somehow within the confines and the allowable limits of free will and the law of free will? I don't really know, but that seems to be a common theme throughout this entire presentation. Okay, now, next one. On the other side, we were good beings. I think this is very, very important. Very, very important. Because we talk about good entities or bad entities. Somebody in the comments the other day said, hey, maybe this is a prison planet for a reason. Think about all the messed up people that are here. Well, this is a very interesting insight, because what these gentlemen say is, no. There's none of us that are bad. We're all good on the other side. The quote unquote negative things that we do, they're a product of this environment, of this universe, of this planet. Take it for what it's worth. I don't know if this is the reality of the situation. I don't know if we truly are all positive and really the negativity comes out as a product of this world, or there is some intrinsic inherent negativity in us. I don't know the answer, but this is interesting food for thought. Check it out.
Soul. And I think that's one message I want to confirm with everybody, that on the other side, we were good beings. We didn't have a bad part. we didn't have a negative part. We didn't have an evil part. We actually were pretty naive, almost childlike in our experience. Yet we were also very old at the same time. And that's something you point out in your video.
So a couple of interesting takeaways. Number one, where does evil come from? Is evil really some of us are evil and we come here and we do evil in this world? Or is it a product of this world? Is it a product of the Matrix? I've thought before that I was inclined to believe, and I know this could be a little bit triggering for some people. They said, but how can you say that this person is not evil? Look at all the things they've done. Look, I don't know the answer to this, but I was starting to really think when I first discovered Gnosticism, especially this idea of the material world itself being inherently flawed and evil, that the negativity and the bad things that happen are more a product of this reality and perhaps the experiences that we have versus just being inherently negative or evil spirits. And look, like I said, that may sound offensive to some people. I'm just theorizing and postulating, but what's more important, don't listen to me, listen to this gentleman who has these pre-birth memories. He's speaking he's not just theorizing, he's speaking from what he remembered observing. So it's interesting, it's food for thought, it's something to contemplate. The other thing that's important here is he talks about the naivety of the spirits on the other side, which again lends to this idea that we're somehow tricked into coming into this reality in the first place, which was talked about in the other pre-birth. Like, it's so crazy how the dots are connecting, right? In that other pre-birth story, the guy said he saw somebody with this amazing essence. He said, oh my God, you have such a bright light, amazing essence. I want that. How do I get that? Oh, how do you get it? Follow me. I think the other gentleman had somewhat of a different but similar idea where he was told, yes, if you come here, you can just spiritually grow at a really rapid rate. So they're dangling a shiny thing in front of us, and we're naive because we're thinking on the positive. We're not used to trickery or deception, so that's possibly a foreign concept to us. Hence, why we get trapped in this rabbit hole and in this realm.
The first video, but we didn't want to go to Earth because it was terrifying for us, and we were shown Earth, and we sensed what it looked like. We saw what it looked like. But did we really need to go? At the time, we thought absolutely not.
Yeah, there it is, right? Okay. So the big takeaway, though, from this clip is that idea that we were good beings. And he's basically saying, I think all of us were good beings, good spirits, good entities on the other side. Food for thought. Okay, next. Where did he begin? Where did he start prior to coming into this plane, coming into this realm? He calls it a void, all black. He could see things. You could see things. It's not like you couldn't see anything. So different entities emanate a light and you could see them by that light. But he did call it being a void. And then how did he come in here? He said he was just called forward by his spirit name. Check this out.
So I was in a dark place, which I'm going to say was a void. And I remember it was almost like not existing or being in a very deep sleep. There were other beings around me, likely also asleep, but I remember being called forth. And right now, as I'm describing this, I'm seeing it again. And I felt almost like if there was a rope or chain in my chest, just pulling me forward. So at that moment, I wasn't sure whether I had a body or not, but I definitely felt that like a central pulling from my chest, pulling me forward. Also, there were three beings in front of me, and what called me forth may have been those beings, but behind the beings, there was also a very huge white light.
Okay, sound familiar, right? All these elements we see in NDEs. Again, the tall figures, the hooded figures where you can't see their faces. Like, that's so common in so many of these NDEs. So it feels like the ambassadors to the Matrix and to the entire system. And then also the pulling, the magnetization that's described. It also seems maybe that's occurring outside of the realm to pull people into the realm. And then last but not least, we see this bright light. So you're going to hear his description. Check this out. And also love bombing is going to be in this as well.
And I think I was called forth by simply my name, which would have been my soul name. After some research in Roy Mills' book, The Soul's Remembrance, he speaks about each soul having a unique name. So me being called forth, I've since concluded was that my name was simply being called. And it could have been either from these three angelic beings who wore robes, or this giant light source. And when I saw the light source, I thought, oh, this is God. I want to merge with God, like just magnetically. And I tried to do that, but I was stopped kind of like in midair. And these three beings kind of escorted me off to the left. And I knew they were calling me forth because I had to incarnate on Earth, which was already upsetting to me.
Okay, so there it is. Similar ideas to what we've heard in the NDEs. He's called forth. They bring him into the light, but what doesn't allow him to go all the way, and then they direct him off. It's like moth to a flame, some sort of a trap on the external. And maybe there's different ways, different methods, right? The other guy, he was just shown this bright essence, and he said, I want to come, and he just volunteers. Okay, cool, you come in. For this gentleman, they use some sort of a magnetic pull. I don't know. Interesting. Okay, now he talks about this light and this entity, and he describes it as actually having no emotion, no feeling, no love. Let's listen to this.
Felt I was in the presence of God, and I immediately want to merge with the being God.
Yeah.
Also, there wasn't any emotion. There wasn't any emotion from this big white light, which later on in time, meaning here on Earth, that is a question I have, because it wasn't a loving emanation from the big being of light.
About that feeling, like you said, it didn't feel loving. Did it just feel neutral? Like a neutral vibe, or how else would you describe that?
It felt like it had no feelings. Like there was just no feelings to it, almost artificial.
That's incredibly
So that
interesting.
is something some people may not want to hear, but I'll say early on, I know we'll talk about this later, but whether we're dealing with divine entities, divine beings, or some people have a theory about an AI-like environment or matrix that's somehow generated in some way that's a simulation. I'm not sure, but in that case, there wasn't a strong loving emotion, and that was a little bit shocking to me at the time.
So take it for what it's worth. Is this just some replica, some AI piece where he couldn't actually feel any emotion? That could be one possibility, and hence the lack of love or anything like that was emanating from it. But there is another possibility. I was just wondering this. This just brought to mind something that Intuitive Underground said when I had them on the show. And what they said is that when they remote viewed the original God mind, effectively Source, they said that Source was perfectly balanced, wasn't pure love, wasn't pure negativity. It was everything, all encompassing. And it was just pure balance. And when it came to us and our fate, or this fate of different divine sparks, it didn't feel a strong compulsion or pull to liberate us or to condemn us, not one way or the other. And it was sort of indifferent in a way to, and maybe that goes back to the idea of free will, having us choose what our fate is. But he said they told me that they remote viewed the God mind and it felt indifferent whether we can choose to come out, we can choose to stay in, but ultimately it's up to us, and didn't have a strong feeling one way or the other about it. So I just bring that up because I'm wondering if, is he describing maybe the God mind that is actually just indifferent in general, and because not in a negative way, but because just, hey, you got to figure your life out and your existence out, and I'm not going to push one way or the other? Or is it more indicative of a artificial light and simulation creator or something like that? I don't know. Okay, next talks about those 3 hooded beings, the weird beings that he saw, which again have been seen in so many NDEs and other accounts.
And with that being said, what about the 3 beings? How did you feel about them?
They had a lot of power. They were almost like angelic soldiers protecting this big light being. And they definitely meant business with me. And they actually had to restrain me. We kind of went off to the left, and they actually kind of like tackled me. And I remember bending down, and each being had a robe on that was kind of like a wine-colored, deep kind of red-brown robe on. And I remember looking at the sleeve of one of the beings' robe, and there was a beautiful blue, electric midnight blue light shimmering all around his sleeve. And I remember they were telling me how the system worked and what the rules were and how I had to behave, essentially, and conform.
Crazy. So pre-programming happening right from the beginning. Now, he also said these beings were very powerful. Is that real? I'm not saying what he's saying is not true, or in terms of what his memories are telling him, but he's saying they seem powerful. Other people have said they seem very powerful. Are they really powerful? Or is this a show? Is this a projection? That's kind of where I'm at right now. This is all about warping perception, because ultimately, aren't we the powerful ones, being of the divine spark? And is this all just part of the trickery that we're made to think that they're more powerful than us? They appear as taller than us, as bigger than us. This is constantly what people say. But is this kind of like a human standing on its tippy toes to scare off a grizzly bear, where the grizzly bear is actually the powerful one, but they're tricked and confused? Is that what we're dealing with? Is that what we're talking about? I think maybe, but I don't know for sure. Okay, now this part is interesting. We to get into this idea of coercion, being forced. Do we need consent? Is there free will? Well, he says right here, he did not want to go to Earth, and he explains why. So again, that begs the question, how much free will do we have? Maybe we do have free will, but if we consent a little bit, that can be twisted or expanded out into full consent. So when we say, okay, fine, I'll go, but I just want to go for a day, then they redefine what a day is or whatever. They can just say, okay, you've partially committed. We can just make that as a full commitment. We're going to send you down and keep you as long as we want. Is it something like that? And that then does not mean there's a violation of free will? I don't know.
After the beings tried to restrain you, what happened after that?
So I didn't want to go. So I requested to be able to see Jesus. And why this is interesting to me now is that I had knowledge that Jesus had some sort of power. He was like an administrator, and I could appeal to him, or thought that he would advocate on my behalf so I wouldn't have to incarnate and go to Earth.
Isn't that crazy? That tripped me out when I heard this. So he's appealing to Jesus, but it's not as though it's different for us, where we're programmed in this life Christianity's all around us, so we know about Jesus. This is apparently his pre-birth memory, I think prior to his very first incarnation is what it sounds like. So Jesus is out there, outside of the matrix as a known entity, I guess, a governing entity, or I don't exactly know. It's kind of different than how he's described in Gnosticism as somebody from the pleroma that almost sneaks in to the material world to help us liberate. But he's some sort of administrator, as they put it, as he puts it, involved in this whole system. That really tripped me out. I don't know what to make of it. Still processing this one, but just want to point that out.
So that was something I didn't experience. I just knew at the time, which I think is pretty interesting.
Wow. So when you called upon Jesus, the Jesus showed himself to you, right? He did he come automatically? How did that happen?
Interestingly, not right away. There was a lag time, and I didn't get to see him first. And by that, I mean that I actually saw first who I knew at the time was the Virgin Mary. Now, I'm telling you this story not being a Catholic at all. I'm a Protestant. And that was very interesting. And Mary was the first being I saw that looked human, meaning had a human form to them. Then beings, by the way, that first restrained me, you could not see their faces. And we know that's a pretty common thing with these beings. Their faces are not easily seen in pre-birth memories or perhaps even NDEs. But Mary did have a human face and had a light type of body when it kind of glowed. And interestingly, she played the function of almost being like Jesus's secretary, that she controlled access to Jesus. And I had to wait with her first until Jesus was ready to see me. And this was all in the area that was completely black. There were no obvious walls, just kind of everything suspended. No stars. This wasn't out in space. I just remember, the void essentially. But eventually I did get to see Jesus, and he first looked human. He did have a white robe on, and right away with him, I started to sense immense power of how powerful he was. And he telepathically discussed a few things. I mean, I don't remember the specifics. And with pre-birth memories, parts of scenes are very sharp and exact. Other parts are more blurry and fuzzy. And that may be due to the way our memories were erased, or partially erased at least. And Jesus decided in communicating with me that, I don't recall the exact message, but it had to be something like, I have to go no matter what. And then Jesus changed, and he started to emit this beautiful golden light. And something happened to me. I had at one point looked down at my forearm to see whether I had a body or not. And I did see that my forearm was transparent. So I had a humanoid form, but it was more like a ghost-like transparent shape. I'm going to refer to that as spirit body going forward. And that, I believe, was my form when I was speaking with Jesus. But when he changed and started to emit a lot of golden light, that actually made me transform from having a spirit body into an orb. And that was a real experience, because it's almost like a welling up from your feet up to your head. And I just became this round ball of light. And the light emanating from Jesus was just unbelievable. It was the most wonderful, unconditional love that I've ever felt, and far surpassing anything here on earth. And when I looked out, I could see thousands of orbs floating around Jesus, all bathed in this beautiful gold inlet. And I actually remember kind of, bouncing up and down a little bit and just circling him in this warm, loving light of unconditional love. And I remember thinking, it was so wonderful. I never, ever, ever wanted to leave. So I think I'm in a state that when I was younger, I thought that was all a good thing. Now I don't think it was a good thing, and we can discuss that later. But essentially, Jesus was kind of energizing me or preparing me to incarnate. So he wanted to give me a little love boost, essentially. You might have heard of love bomb being discussed online with these beings, but that's actually what occurred. And from there, Jesus actually took me on a little tour. So I'll stop there, but
there it is. So I didn't want to go Jesus or the entity that looked like, who knows, right? Is that really Jesus, or is that some entity, a projection of Jesus? I don't know. But he's saying you have to go. Coercion. Still not forcing, still not just grabbing you and throwing you down, which is a good sign, saying probably there's still some element of free will. And then to get the final sign off, love bombing, which we see all the time, bathed in this light and just unconditional love and made to feel so good. Best feeling he's ever had. We hear this over and over, and I think many people have said this seems to be a manipulation tactic, and he's even saying that himself. Again, that's the major difference with these two gentlemen and most other accounts. These guys are wise to what's going on, and I think that's what makes this account so special. These pre-birth memories are really, really gold in terms of trying to glean what's really going on out there. Now, this is crazy. This is crazy. This shows that they are actively trying to stop you out there from gathering more information, keeping more information, fighting back against the memory wipe. They want you as ignorant as possible, which makes complete sense, to stay compliant with the system and stay compliant with this reality and realm. And here's the evidence in this testimony of exactly the fact that they don't want you learning and knowing more.
Right before I saw Earth, I was sort of I went into this area where I was receiving infinite knowledge, and it was my intention to do so. And I've gone back and forth on that part where I was thinking, well, maybe they're injecting that information to me. But looking back at it now, I realize that it was my intention. I went up into an area and I was just absorbing all this information, just pouring into me at the speed of light. And I think that's exactly why the guides kind of feel like they're policing you, because they want you to get down to earth as fast as possible, and they don't want you to learn too much. What do you think about that, Seth?
Absolutely. I agree. One thing I'm not telling you is I have multiple pre-birth memories on different scenes, different locations. And another one that I have is I was in a queue, a line, in a area that had stone walls, and there were multiple beings in line, almost like an amusement park ride, waiting to incarnate. And we had to stand, face to back in a line, and we weren't able to all go at one time. We had to wait, and basically there was a kind of a rush to kind of push the line through, I would say, as well. Before one of my visuals is that I saw the being in front of me actually have to step forward and disappear when that soul actually incarnated to Earth. So there's definitely a process occurring, and there's lines or cues, and they are rushed sometimes to try to get people, meaning the souls, to incarnate as quickly as possible.
That is just a huge key point and a common theme we've seen in all these pre-birth experiences. Like all of them feel rushed. So
And why is that?
I think it's because they know, again, if they don't contain us, we won't be able to be used as cannon fodder, in Earth realm. That's what I think.
That's what I think too. Trying to rush us, keep us blind. Maybe right in that moment, as we're absorbing information, we might get information about why we should stand up, what we should do, we should pull out of it. So they want to get us in. And then once we're in the system, it's probably easier to keep us manipulated, because once they hit us with that first memory wipe, now it's probably very, very easy, or much easier, to contain us. So that's the main obstacle, is to get us in that first time, rush us in. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And I'm so glad these guys have this viewpoint, as opposed, like, different than the other guys, because they're able to see each piece and remember each piece and convey what each piece is in terms of what it really is, what I think it really is, versus probably those other gentlemen left out or missed some of these details because they're thinking, no, this is all good. This is all for our benefit. I'm choosing this. So they weren't privy to all these other pieces, which paint a very different picture. Okay, next slide. Shoot. So here, I actually forgot to change the title. I can't remember what this piece is about, but we'll get into it and then I'll chop it up. But I'm sure this is important.
Right before I saw Earth, I was sort of I went into this area where I was receiving infinite knowledge, and it was my intention to do so. And I've gone back and forth on that part, where I was thinking, well, maybe they're injecting that information.
No, this is the same clip. Sorry, I doubled it up. Okay, next, he was shown Earth. Now, this part is interesting because he's shown Earth and he talks about how it looked terrible in comparison to what he had experienced and what he was existing in, and that he didn't want to go.
When I saw Earth at that time, that's where I was really terrified, because Earth changed from a beautiful planet into this dark, black, bubbling mass in front of me. Yes, with a few little lights in it here and there shining out of the darkness. But again, as a soul, I had, my senses were enhanced, and I could, look into things and feel or sense situations or individuals or people or events. And when I did that to this Earth, that was just this big, bubbling, ugly black mass, I sensed all the pain and suffering on Earth. And I also had a few scenes of wars occurring and all the negativity that is, part of our day-to-day experience here on the planet. So I was so upset when I saw that, all the chaos, all the pain, all the suffering, that I thought, I'm not going to that place. That place is crazy. So I thought that and knew that pre-birth, which is maybe one reason why I was so afraid to incarnate and requested to see Jesus to try to get out of the process.
There it is. That's a pretty interesting, I think, a very important perspective as well. This is not somebody in between lives. This is not somebody who's had their memory wiped of what's outside. This is somebody who knows what's outside, and with that knowledge, looking in and seeing this realm, this planet, this matrix. They don't want to go. They don't want to come. I think we probably all had a feeling that was likely the raw emotion, the raw reaction to coming here, based on what we've seen and experienced ourselves. But I just thought it was very interesting that he states it point blank. He was shown Earth, did not want to go. The incarnation is a scam. Pretty sure he says that verbatim in this clip. I think it's well said. Like I said, distinguishing factor between this account and the other two that I covered. Check this out.
Still in a completely dark area, there was another being that approached me, and this was a large male being who definitely did not emanate any love or positive feeling. But the being told me telepathically And now I'm going to erase your memory. So it was right before the point where I entered a tunnel-like structure to come to Earth, which to me involved interstellar travel. And I was told by the being, okay, and now I'm going to erase your memory. I remember thinking very strongly with every fiber I had in my soul. I said to myself, oh, no, you're not. I'm going to remember. And my intention was to remember for a few reasons. And you and I have discussed this prior to this video. But one was that I knew I was going to Earth and it was going to be so difficult and traumatic. I wanted to remember the other side. So I had a little bit of maybe help, psychological help to get through my difficult experiences on Earth, that there was something more than just our day-to-day lives. But I also wanted to remember because I really felt like at the moment that this whole experience of incarnation was a scam. I mean, it was a, more of a nefarious, scandalous situation that I was being, coerced or forced to incarnate. So I was definitely going to remember. I was going to resist. And it was because my resistance that I had these memories, I believe now. And I've had them since I was very young, even before puberty. They've stayed with me for decades. They're sharp as ever. What I just described, I went back and I visually saw, even in this conversation, in any sentences that I'm saying. So yeah, I wasn't going to forget.
It's pretty powerful that he sees this and he recognizes it for what we think it really is, that it is indeed a scam. And now, of course, there's a lot of manipulation, coercion, different things like that involved. So it would make sense that some people are going to see through it with really good discernment, maybe a few people, but the majority, like the other two gentlemen that I featured in the last two videos, they're not going to see it. And that's hence why you have the difference in the retelling of these accounts and why most people seem to just go along with the narrative, but a handful of people are able to discern. Another interesting takeaway is he chose to remember. He fought against the memory wipe, and I think that's an important takeaway as well. Maybe we do have that power. Even if we somewhat consent to it, you can still fight back against it. And in this way, he was able to retain these memories, which now look at all the way he's helping people on this planet. So I think that's something really important to keep in mind. Now we get into the question of consent. Did you actually consent? Is there free will? Is there not free will? And it's a complicated question, a complicated issue, as we've already talked about and as we've already seen. But here they get into that a little bit more deeply.
How do you feel about that personally? Do you feel completely that you were forced and had zero choice whatsoever, or did you consent at the end of the day?
Well, I can say with 100% confidence, I was coerced. So it wasn't like any of the beings were paying any attention to how terrified I was. And I really want everybody to think about the word terrified, because you were terrified and I was terrified. When you're terrified, it's not like, oh, you're just a little bit of afraid of doing something. It's no, you're actually in a state of being terrified. And that's how afraid I was to actually come to Earth. I mean, you can sense love on the other side, but you can also sense severe fear, being terrified, etc. So despite me feeling that way, and also knowing I was a good being, I didn't think I had to go to Earth, okay? I mean, why did I have to go to Earth? And despite my protest in one way or another, it didn't matter. And they were just funneling me through this system as rapidly as they could to achieve my incarnation. So I would have to say at the minimum, I was 100% sure I was coerced and forced. I mean, because in that state, we didn't talk about the guides and how they looked and so forth. But yes, they were, robed beings often. They're always larger than souls or our spirit bodies on the other side, according to many PBM accounts. And it's a system that we're already under their authority, essentially. in the PBM experience. So we kind of had to listen to them. I mean, they were our teachers, our security guards, our prison guards, however you want to describe them. They were still managing us. So again, at minimum coercion. And I have to say overall, yeah, I was forced. They wouldn't let me stay there because I didn't want to go. They didn't listen to any of my concerns or my fears. So maybe it's a fine line between strong coercion and being forced, but I don't think it's exactly wrong to say at least some of us were not forced to come here. We actually were forced to come here. We just didn't volunteer and say, oh, we want to come to Earth because we know we can make it better and help everybody.
Yeah, so again, we have this fine line, but I think ultimately he's saying, hey, is it forced or a strong coercion? It still, to me, sounds like strong coercion. You still need some sign off, and then maybe once you have that sign off, they can be a little bit pushy. At least I'm hoping, because it's a much dimmer outlook, a much scarier outlook if we think that you can straight up be forced. Maybe I don't want to believe it, but I have a feeling though too, but just based on the laws of the universe and what I've uncovered thus far, that they do why do they go through the trouble of even explaining, or why would you not just be sucked in and be like, oh my god, I was sucked into a trap and I had no idea what was going on, it was spit out here, that was my memory. That's not the case. That's not what's happening. So I do think it's more on the coercion side than it is on the straight up forced side, just to give a little bit of hope there on that side. Now he talks about the different types of coercion, what coercion can look like.
Again, they hear forced and then they automatically think, oh, we're stuck forever. And that's, to me, I don't think that's the case at all. This is not just as simple as forced. There is no consent, no free will. This is a multi-layered consent and non-consent situation. What do you think about that, Seth?
I totally agree. And I also believe pre-birth memory individuals that say they chose to come here, or they came here because they thought they could help, mankind. Or, you've heard stories from people that claim they're star seeds and they came from some other planet or galaxy here to Earth to help out. So I don't discount their accounts, but my point is, for me personally, oh yes, I was coerced / forced. No doubt, tackled, restrained. My memory was taken from me against my will. I had to resist to retain some of it. And in your case, for the viewers, you actually negotiated keeping some of your memories in exchange for a more difficult life here on Earth, which is interesting. So there is some bargaining that can go on as well. So I think, for future videos, we can talk about the complexities of all these different operations. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way things happen on the other side. And it's detangling what we can to figure out how it operates and what it means for each person here on Earth.
And again, I have a feeling it probably depends. The level of coercion applied is what is needed, what is necessary to get you to cross in. Once you're in the trap, it's probably much easier to manipulate you once your memory has been wiped and you're kind of in this cyclic existence. So in some cases, we'll hear people like the other stories. They were easy to convince. Oh my God, I see that. I want that. Oh, you can have it. Just follow me. In this case, he was kind of sucked in, targeted in, got a little bit of buy-in. He called for Jesus. They brought in maybe Jesus or maybe a projection that was a false entity, and then they got him to buy in a little bit. And once you buy in a little bit, then they were able to kind of push and pressure and poke and prod to get him in, and that's acceptable along the lines of free will. So it's sort of, I think the level of coercion depends on your willingness to come in, which then leads to the possibility, I think, that if your resistance is strong enough at the beginning, or even probably at this point when we pass on, if your resistance is strong enough, you can evade being drawn back into the system. That's what it feels like to me. I really think it's just that potentially straightforward. At least that's where I'm at right now, until I really get proven otherwise. And we shall see what the rest of the information shares. But anyways, that's the entirety of this video. That's what I wanted to share with you guys. What a riveting story from both of these gentlemen who both have pre-birth memories, and that's how they connected. And and decided to do this episode together. So check it out. I'm going to put the link in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What'd you make of this, plus the several other pre-birth memory videos? I'd love to know. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.